Hello, I'd like to welcome everybody today to Family Office Insights. We have a remarkable program for you. With me today is Rachel Cash. She has a company which is Elroi, and I think everybody is going to really enjoy it. So if everybody can hop in, I'd like to remind you that you are very welcome to ask questions in chat. You can't see us. We can see your names. If you have a question, the Q&A or the chat box is probably the best way to do that, and I'll keep an eye on that. But again, thank you so much for joining us today. And Rachel, would you like to start your presentation?
I would, thank you. So hello, my name is Rachel Cash. I'm the founder and CEO of Elroi. We are a privacy data management company serving both consumers and enterprises, so customers. For us, there's no real clear standard for data privacy. We have seen in our current marketplace that 85% of global customers wish they had more companies they could trust with their data, which I'm sure we all can understand in the current environment. And specifically for companies, there's over 130 global privacy regulations that they need to comply with, and new ones being added every day, such as the CCPA in California, Colorado, and Virginia. And we've seen recently in the news, as recent as earlier this month, WhatsApp received a fine of $267 million for breaching some of the European Union privacy regulations. So we're continuing to see these fines in our space. For Elroi, we are the Zelle of data privacy. And by that, we are sitting in between consumers and enterprises and really trying to create equality and fairness between data exchanges. We're rethinking the power dynamic between customers and enterprises. And in order to do that, we're empowering customers to exercise their privacy rights. And for enterprises, we help them meet the compliance regulations as well as exceed their customers' expectations in how data privacy is being managed. We really are the data platform for all. And when we are talking about our marketplace, we believe in just consumer or customers over in general. So for enterprises, we help automate data management platforms, as well as for consumers, we provide one central location to see which companies have your data, as well as actioning your rights. So for a customer to have the ability to delete, return, or do data modification. On the other side, again, for our enterprises, while we're automating the data management process, we provide data mapping, data disposal, and data return, really being a one-stop spot for the whole ecosystem. There are other players currently in our marketplace, but we're uniquely positioned to be the glue of all data exchanges and data management. And that's really our goal at Elroi and our North Star. Some of the bigger competitors in our space in the enterprise side are very focused or solely focused on enterprise data management, such as Big ID and OneTrust. What makes us different is that we're paying attention to the market trends. We're seeing that consumer positioning themselves, companies positioning themselves as a marketing strategy to really focus on data privacy. And that's why we're providing a platform for customers to standardize how these exchanges are happening. And on the consumer side, one of the lead platforms is Say Mine, and they're really only focused on the consumer and intaking data subject requests, but really are not managing the data for the enterprise. And really there is this duality that must happen in order to solve the problem in our space. Traction to date, currently we're very focused on our business development in financial services. We've just completed an RFP with Comerica Bank, as well as completed 10 pilot enterprise programs, with 8 of them converting over to annual contracts next year. As well as outside of our business development traction, we received non-dilutive funding from Ann Arbor Spark program, where we've been partnering with the University of Michigan and Ann Arbor Spark in terms of our research and development and different IP. We also are in the midst of working on a channel partnership agreement with Rock Rose Security out of Texas, who have over 5,000 clients and will be at Elroi automating their assessment and helping those clients get into tactical compliance for the growing regulations. On our timeline for Milestones, this year we'll be relaunching our data subject request portal. We ran successful pilots and learned a lot during that pilot program. And so a lot of those iterations and the iterations that are coming out at the end of this year are focused on making some of the adjustments that our pilots recommended, as well as expanding our features for our pilot customers. Next year, we'll be launching as a highlight on January 28th is National Data Privacy Day. And that's when we'll be launching our consumer view that allows consumers, again, to see which data a company has on them and then action their rights in one central location. This is really pivotal in really reshaping the data ecosystem. Going further, by the end of next year of 2022, we'll be launching our data brokerage, which is really a combination of getting down to a zero copy data compliance, and allowing customers to not only track which data is out there in the ecosystem, reduce the data, and then eventually commodify their own data. In our marketplace, we believe the opportunity is over 550 billion. And what we're looking at currently to date is really focused on data protection and privacy, which is around 120 billion projected in 2022. But our overall long-term goal is to be really intersected in the global data, big data, which is projected to reach 450 billion by 2026. In order to get to that goal, we've built a team that is not only aligned with our passions of believing data privacy is a right, but we have over a combined 30 years of experience specifically in data privacy. Some of our key team members, well, I'll introduce myself again. My name is Rachel Cash, and I am the founder and CEO, as well as a privacy attorney licensed in Michigan. I've both worked in-house for financial services as well as in utility companies, so very consumer facing. Outside of that, our lead engineer has both tenured at Quicken Loan and Google, again, consumer facing. We recently brought on a fractional CFO who's been pivotal in helping us with our financial planning and strategy. Brent Campbell, who's had multiple successful exits and have helped one of their key companies, Home Lending Pal. And recently we brought on a new board of advisor member, Rodney Atkins, who's been very tactical and both strategic in advising us. He was the former senior vice president at IBM. Currently, we're in the midst of an active funding round. We're raising 1.6 million on a convertible note. And we have allocated our funds over the next 12 months. 65% of it will be going towards development and infrastructure. 25% is going towards business development and marketing, and 10% is going to ancillary items. We've identified what I like to call a roster of bench players that we have planned to deploy as we complete our round. That's all for me, and I'd welcome any questions.
Rachel, can we exit out of the screen real quick?
Yep.
Okay, so you're welcome again to put your questions into chat, to put your questions into Q&A. Although we can't hear you, we can certainly see the questions. So you mentioned you're a data privacy attorney, so this is your space. This is what you do. All right, I had one question as we were going through it. You said the platform helped you discover who has your data.
Correct.
Can you go into that a little more?
Yeah, so in a good use case, Wendy, would be you using your personal computer for customers, either for businesses customers or you as an individual. We have a browser extension that allows us to track the PI data element that you may have provided any company as you browse. And so our first iteration of our solution is browser extensions for Safari and Google and Chrome. Google Chrome. And so we can tell from your form fields or any emails the data element, we don't store the data, we keep a hash of that data. So we just can tell Wendy provided her full name to Pizza Hut on this date with this number of instances. So for example, if you wanted to request of Pizza Hut to delete your data, you will know a scope of that data, or if Pizza Hut had a data breach, you would have the evidence that you gave Pizza Hut your name, your address, and email address, this date, and this number of instances. In the future, we'll be able to use that data for you to commodify your own data, not just your PI data, but your behavioral data as well.
So if I'm a customer of Elroi, is that something you monitor? You can tell me today at this snapshot in time who has my data. Is that something for customers that you continuously monitor? You check in once a week, once a month? How does that work?
Yep, so it's real-time monitoring. So we are tracking from the day you sign up from Elroi in real time and until you tell us stop.
Well, I think there's been so many data breaches.
Mm-hmm.
Like once a month, I get some obscure site I can't even remember being on. And they're like, oh, we just wanted to inform you. And I'm like, oh. Or somebody's Facebook sends me spam, and it's just constant. And now I've been watching all these companies get hacked for Bitcoin. We're on the East Coast with the whole gas problem from the last one. You were talking about the regulations. So are the regulations, is that something you also inform your customers of? Like, oh, hey, we're putting out a newsletter, you have a new regulation. Do you do any of that compliance for them, or just inform them of it? How does that work?
Yeah, so from our customer base, we understand that there's two different customer perspectives. So for you, Wendy, as an individual, we provide a newsletter that lets a customer know you're on the West Coast. New York has a privacy regulation that will be passing. Ohio, if you're Midwestern, has a privacy regulation. If you are a business company or business customer, that will impact you. We also have a different newsletter that's more business driven. Say, if you're doing $25 million book of business and you have this XYZ% of customers, what is your requirements to meet the regulations, and what is the potential risk to your business, such as fines? The US has individual state regulations, not just privacy, but privacy adjacent regulations that may impact you. So if you're HIPAA related, or in New York, for example, you had the privacy of your tenants. That's adjacent to privacy. So our newsletters go out, as well as our technology continues to iterate based on the changes of privacy. So if it's specifically towards a regulation that's either global regulation or state specific, we make changes for a particular business, and we can do some scoping and allow the business to do some configurations that will work with them.
That is fantastic. Yeah, I think it's real interesting. Isn't there a federal regulation coming out shortly that if you've been kidnapped, hijacked, I don't know the right word for it, that you have to report it now? Isn't that what they're trying to do? I saw something about that.
Yeah, so we are seeing more breach regulations. So there are specific federal breach regulations that are coming out that will address companies, that will say if you have breached a record of 100,000 customers, you must send notification not only to the customer, but to the state that the customer may dwell in. And each attorney general will have their own regulation. One of the other interesting trends that we're seeing is that we do anticipate in the next 2 to 3 years that a privacy specific regulation will come out that will require companies not only to give notifications around breaches, but also have limits to how long a company may keep data, as well as how long what a company has to do for you in terms of returning data or opting out of sharing that data with third parties. Okay,
this brings up an important point. I have an Apple phone. And I don't know if I should put that out there or not, but I do. And one of the new features was I can ask them not to track. And then I saw on Twitter, which I also probably shouldn't confess to spending time on, that was a joke. And even though you've opted out of allowing the app to track, it could still track. So now is that something Elroi is going to be able to go in and go, yeah, you said don't track, but we're tracking.
Yeah, so one of the things that we do is we automate opting out for you. So when you go to a website right now, you have to actively say, we don't want to opt out. We can automate that for our customers and saying you want to opt out. But the second thing we do is we request of our customers to make privacy requests of those companies, because the only real way right now currently to make sure Apple's not tracking is to test their systems, their privacy systems. So you can say I opted out, Elroi will keep a record of that. And then what you would have to do is ask Apple, hey, return the data that you have on me from this time period to even see if it existed, if the tracking. So you're constantly doing these impact assessments of your choices. And that's not something a typical average customer will do for a company. That's one of the things that we are providing for our consumer bases for free, for one, because we believe it's a right. And outside of that, we're seeing enterprises position themselves as privacy forward. So Apple spent millions and millions of dollars to put themselves as privacy forward as a company. And it really is a marketplace differentiator. There's no one checking and making sure that it's happening.
And we all feel better because we asked the app not to track, right?
Right. And so you have to, as a consumer, constantly check the system. And really right now in the 90s, the internet exploded. We have Twitter coming out, we had Apple, we had all these big companies, and social media changed. And now in 2020, we're trying to control that, like what happened with our data. And that's really the place that we want to. And so we're giving consumers the accessibility to do that, and working really nicely with the enterprises to make sure, because most enterprises now want to do the right thing overall.
Well, it seemed like for a lot of years there, I couldn't even go to buy a pair of pants unless I gave them my email, and not just for billing, just to even look at their site. And I've noticed lately that's kind of stopped a little bit. Mm-hmm. You don't need my email just to have me look at, browse a bunch of dress blouses, right?
Exactly.
It's sort of ridiculous. So let me get to financials, and I'll go back to the raise in just a second, but how much do you anticipate? And I know it's going to matter if it's a company, if it's an individual, how many employees, what kind of data. But if I am a company of 100 people and I'm doing retail, what is that going to look like on a monthly charge for me to use Elroi?
Yeah, so we have different tiers based on the company's needs. So for a company who has 100 people, and depending, really our regulations will depend, we can get a company both in tactical compliance or strategic compliance. And what we mean by that is we can get you in short-term compliance or compliance that meets your program. So if you're a company that has 100 people and you just want to be privacy forward, we can get you on a program that's around $129 a month. We can stand it up for you in about an hour. But if you're a company who has 100 people and you're managing 2 million data records and doing a huge amount of business, we have our SaaS solution, which is around $132,000 annually, but we've automated the whole process for you. So automating your data mapping, return to customers, your disposal. So really simplifying your workflows. So we really are fitting into what the business requirements are, because we understand that a privacy program for a business is complicated because it has to take in your business workflow. So we've modularized our product and built it so it can fit different companies' programs that is required.
That's fantastic. Now back to the raise, and you're in the GP round now, correct? Okay, yep. And what is your ask?
1.6 million, and we're on a convertible note.
Fantastic. And what increments would you take that in, Rachel?
So we're tranching out our round. So our first tranche is around 600,000. And then we are, our minimum investment is 100,000 during the tranches.
That is fantastic. Let me go back to the kidnap and ransom of data, only because it's been in the news, and I just find this fascinating that these people can come in and hold a country hostage for their data. Now there's going to be regulations to report a breach. Is there going to, or do you think there will be regulations to report a ransom request?
So we've seen some draft regulations that indicate there will be a requirement to report ransom, because essentially that is a breach. You have an unauthorized person having your data. But more so right now, the companies may have a data breach, but don't speak to someone wants us to pay money for us to get your data back, and we are not going to pay that money. And that typically is the case. We actually had a company out of North Carolina, one of the court systems had a ransom and they didn't pay. And the citizens didn't necessarily know until it was exposed later. But we're seeing more regulations in the space. We're both attorneys, so one of the more interesting things is that privacy and security laws are one of the things that are changing the most as we keep up with technology, and technology is changing. So we've seen a lot more breaches. We do believe in terms of the trajectory, it has bipartisan support. That we'll see some regulations around ransom and giving notifications. We're starting to see it in the European Union, and we typically mirror what's happening very closely because we're a global country. We have to deal with global regulations.
So let me ask you this, because this is all the buzz. The family offices are very paranoid about their privacy and their data and what is out there. And a lot of them say, okay, so we go to this step and we do everything we can to secure. And don't they just find another way around it? Is it just an endless cycle of we shore up, they breach, we shore up again, they breach?
Yeah, so one thing that we in our standing is we really believe in reduce copy of data. So what we sit very nicely adjacent to security and our security counterparts, because we're really trying to reduce the data that's in an organization and easing the footprint. So it also reduces the risk. Not necessarily saying that you can make your systems bulletproof, but you can reduce how much data and where your data is in antiquated systems. You don't need data from 20 years ago, it's not relevant. So what we can do is automate and provide functional retention schedules or schedules of the usefulness of that data. So once you reduce Wendy's data in an organization from not maybe 20 years or not your social security number in 20 systems, let's reduce it down to 2 systems that absolutely needs it. So then we can have your crown jewels and lock those systems down instead of having to worry about this huge ecosystem in the organization. So again, reducing, right now we're about risk reduction, and that's where privacy and security fits really nicely.
Rachel, I'm an email hoarder. Many of my coworkers are email hoarders. My house is very neat. My email is a hoard pile. Mm-hmm. And I was told by our IT that does create risk. Can you explain how for the other hoarders out there?
Yeah, so it gives opportunities. So one of the things is our emails are really easy targets. Right. So we get, and most organizations now are doing these phishing practices and understanding that people will do targeted attacks and try to get access. But when you have all your data in your email, a lot of us send PI or personal information through email, like we send. And I've done this before too, where I've applied for an apartment or a job and sent a picture of my driver's license, right? And now your data's continuously in that email. And then 2, it's in that cloud environment. And a lot more companies are moving out of their databases into more cloud environments. So there's a lot of data that's unstructured, and I'll get into this. So your email also is unstructured. So it's harder for us to tell what's in that email. So like typically when we're thinking about databases, if you think about an Excel sheet, it's in rows and columns. So we can tell like, hey, social security number belongs from this application in this column. Your email is full of just anything you type out, you could put anything in there. And so keeping all that information and potentially dangerous links that you may go back just increases your risk overall. So again, it's about reducing the amount of data in unstructured systems.
So no hoarding 20,000 emails?
Yeah, no hoarding 20,000 emails.
Okay, fair enough. All right. To our attendees, if you would like to type in a question into the Q&A or chat, Rachel has graciously said she will answer them. If not, I have just a few more questions myself. I think you're fascinating. I think this is fascinating, and it's something as a company we're talking about all the time. I can't tell you how many meetings we're in where there's been a breach. Seems like every day somebody clicks on something or they have to go to a site that's not safe, and yeah, they're like, but I know them. No, you don't. Don't go to that site. So there has been a few sites popping up recently, and I'll pick on, because I know them, I'll pick on Trusted Family, which is one of the sites that family offices on board to because it protects their data. They can send data, they can share pictures that the family may not want the teenagers to share out on Facebook or anything else. Are they secure? And I'm not picking on them in a bad way, but when you create a self-contained system, is that safer than the regular cloud out there where everybody's saving stuff, going in and out and everything else?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of private storage of data, to tell you the truth. I think there's a lot of really good companies out there who are doing good work. Specifically, we're seeing a lot of companies become data wallets and keeping data on the behalf of customers in the same aspect. From Elroi's perspective for consumers, we're doing that essentially for your PI, personal information, so your name, email address. But when you can get down to photos and identification, like our private family pictures, I think it's a better process. One of the things, and I think one of the things we have to remember when we're in technology and what we try to be very cognizant of, a lot of the things like social media is meant for easeability, right? To share with like more of your friends. And so I think there's, while I really like those private cloud environments, I think they're safe. I think the technology stacks that they're using right now are safer as long as they're keeping up and you're making sure you're updating your system and they're working on their patchwork. There's a limited risk of how many people may have exposure to them. Nothing's 100% safe on the internet, right? And second, a lot of this is about convenience. A lot of things that we do on social media provides convenience. Like if you're Googling something and you see, I want to go to Hawaii and XYZ date, and then they start popping up rental car places, there's a point that the internet's supposed to be useful, and then there's a point that there's intrusiveness to it and there's a security risk there. And so there's a balance. So while again, I think the private servers and clouds and data wallets are very, very good practices. Password manager, I think, is more important, but I think they're safe, especially for a certain demographic. I think it's a really good choice.
I like that. One last question. A lot of times, if you're on your phone and people, or you're on your computer, and I know people work with this, and they're playing a game of solitaire, right? And the ad pops up, which they now have to watch to continue their silly little game that they're playing at work. Does that allow a security breach into the company?
Yeah, so one of the things that's been really interesting are the API calls that, so there was an error, I will say, and we've hopefully have been aware of Cambridge Analytica and all the different games and stuff that happened on Facebook. They gave a lot of exposure to your data. And while from my perspective, I'm very much interested in the privacy of it all, how much of your data was given to someone and then they help make actions for you, there also is a security risk there or a breach of some sort because you have your email addresses on your platforms. So every time you give access to those third-party apps and they give access to a ad tech company, then it's exposing you to the potential that that company may say, oh, well, here's her email address that's associated with their account. There's only so many passwords that it takes to crack your password or hack your systems. And two, I think, so that's from your consumer perspective. Second, a lot of the game developers during the era that most of us played games, did not focus on security. So when they started working with these ad tech companies, and you have these ad tech companies doing these integrations, their weaknesses were typically because you're building fast software that, you know, those games and different things that you were using was something built fast and meant to make a lot of money really quickly and then go build something else. It wasn't meant to say like stand the test of time.
No, they didn't care.
Yeah, they didn't care. So yes, there were vulnerabilities that gave access. And then now when you go to sites, it's like your password and email address may be, you know, exposed to this. So again, I think the most important is to make sure your accounts are very secure, and then be careful about what you allow to click on and be installed on your systems. Like make sure it's a reputable gaming company, or because the ads you can't necessarily avoid, but you can avoid the publisher of the game or what you're working with.
Fabulous. Rachel, I can't thank you enough. I actually, you know, I sit through a lot of these, but I really feel like I learned a lot today because I was picking your brain, and I really thank you so much. Everybody, Arthur will send round so that you can contact Rachel about Elroi. And Rachel, thank you again so much.
Thank you, Wendy. Have a good rest of your day.
You too. Everybody have a great day.